started? Is that right?
You are at Prep 5. I think this is session. Sorry. I don't really talk quietly. I don't like talking to the mic either. We're in the business analysis session. Today, we are getting together to talk about some experience that we've had and knowledge we have related to business analysis. Hopefully, you're excited about that. I am Carrie Chakowski. I'm from Import. I'm a senior business analyst. Oh, starting off great. Natalie Pajewski, she's also from Import. She's, in addition, a senior business analyst. We have Karen Rees. She is the project director for CalPeers. She's one of our panelists here. she has ample experience. Rebecca Stilling. She is the CIO for Department of Child Services. And Anne Batten. Yes. She is the Enterprise Director over at Department of Child Services. Thanks. So a wealth of experience here for you today to talk about business analysis and ask lots of questions. Our goal here today is for this to be very interactive. We want to give you our experience and answer any questions you have and kind of get a chance for you to talk to each other about being business analysts and what you think a business analyst is or should do. Our goal is for this to be a very interactive experience. So some of the topics we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about your very generic definition of a business analyst and what we think some of the objectives of a business analyst are. We're going to talk about our own experiences with projects and how they've suffered and what, as a business analyst, we've had to do or should have done to make the project better or to avoid problems. Our panelists are going to talk about what makes a good business analyst, the qualities of a strong business analyst, the values a business analyst can provide to a project in each phase of the project, and some of the skills and tools a business analyst can use to help a project through some of the important decision-making processes that are a part of the project. About midway through the session, we'll start our scenario session, where we will actually each do a scenario, a real-life scenario, and talk about how best to handle that situation. And at the end, we'll wrap up with some ways to improve some skills, some ways to improve your skills as a business analyst, or if you have business analysts that work for you, how you can help improve their skills. Use the paper if you use them. So, what is a business analyst?
I get to talk now. Hi. Carrie and I aren't professional speakers, as you can see. We are the delivery people, so please bear with us. I have my degree in math, not in communications. Basically, this is, if you're familiar with the Project Management Institute, there's also an institute, an International Institute for Business Analysis, and this is they have a FABOC, and it actually provides certification on becoming a business analyst. This is how they define business analysis. So Carrie and I have decades of experience coming into different organizations that we basically know nothing about when we get there. And we understand that we have to gather information as quickly as we can so that we can be liaisons for the stakeholders to the project team. So here's the definition, and we're bringing knowledge to support decisions for the management of a project or any of the decision makers in the project. That's right.
You know, computer technology. There we go. I broke it already. So I'm a good tester.
So from my experience, this is how I see or from MCorp's experience as well, this is how we see the objectives of a business analyst. So a business analyst is brought in to ensure that all the stakeholders, the project team, so they understand the business and the project. So here's some examples of the things that a business analyst would want to come up to speed on: the organization, the processes that are involved in the project, performance metrics, expectations of the project, expectations of the stakeholders, estimations as far as when things have to be done, things like that. The objectives of the project, the strategy for the organization, any dependencies such as legislative mandates, other projects that are going on that might cause a dependency of the project. Volatility of the environment. Is the environment changing quite a bit? The scope of the project, and of course the needs or requirements and the issues and opportunities that you'd like to realize. The business analyst also ensures that the project delivers a quality solution that supports the business, addresses the needs and objectives that were defined for the project, and is successfully transitioned into the organization and organizational culture. So I think some of our keynote speakers mentioned that process is a big thing. Your processes are usually aligned to your capabilities, technically, and so if you're implementing a new solution, new technology, then you'd have to modify your processes to align with that so you have an efficient environment.
So that's really the technical definition of a business analyst. And you can take business analyst classes, you can read books and get a lot of details about what it really means to be that business analyst and all the nitty-gritty of that sort of technical business analyst. What I really want to do today is talk about our experience, because that's what we have. I mean, that's the value, I think, of this group, is that you have probably 50, 60 years worth of experience as running big projects. Just between Nellie and I.
Nice city. Very nice.
So that's what we want to talk about, is our experience. So the next slide I wanted to go through is the reasons why projects suffer. Hopefully the rest of it shows up. But there are 3 scenarios that happen all the time. A system's built, it gets implemented, all the users do is complain. It's not what I wanted, it doesn't do what I need. If anybody watches Seinfeld, it turns into Festivus. All they're going to do is complain. The second scenario, you build it, it is exactly what they need. It meets their needs exactly. But they still don't like it. They still don't use it, and it goes nowhere and it dies. You're rebuilding it again the next year. Third scenario, it dies before it gets started. It goes nowhere. You maybe get through the requirements if you're lucky, and it sort of dies on the vine. There's many, I could spend hours going through many reasons why that is. We brainstormed, came up with 8 that I see all the time. The business analyst role wasn't included or defined well in each phase of the system development lifecycle. That's the implementation, planning, requirements, design, development, testing, implementation, and lessons learned. Business analysts, we'll talk more about this as we go through the session today. They have a role in every single step of that process. Things like development, you think, what is the business analyst doing? It's a black box. Development, they can go to sleep. No, they can't. As you know, things change in development. There's a design issue that maybe you thought was going to work one way. When they go to build it, it works another. The business analyst needs to be on top of that. They need to be managing that change from everywhere from the developer all the way through the subject matter experts and forward into change management to make sure that they're ready for that changed expectation. So your business analyst needs to be active all the way through the process and ideally consistent. Business analysts use a static approach versus a dynamic approach. I see that a lot with projects that sort of that die on the vine concept. As a business analyst, you can come in and you can be essentially a note taker. That's a static approach, and that's valid on some projects. Sometimes you come into an organization that has exactly what they want already thought out, already thought through, and your job is to translate it so that development can then take their business requirements, build a design, build a system. That's a very static approach. Sometimes you go into an organization and they don't know what they want yet. They have a vague idea of where they want to go, and you have to help them get there. So you have to take a very active, a very dynamic approach in that you're going to have to figure out, who do I need to bring in the room to get to the right answer? And what process do I need to use to help everybody get there? So it's a very different style, and it is important to know which organization you're working with, which type of organization you're working with, and who you're working with. Another really big issue is understanding an organization's culture before going too far. An organization has the ability to change only so much. And you have to understand the skill sets of the people in that organization, their ability to get funding to change that skill set if it's necessary. All of those decisions need to be made up front before you go too far, because you can build a system, and if you don't have the right people to support it, it's going to fall on its face. And everybody in this room, I'm sure, has been in that scenario. So understanding what that organization can do is very important and to determining the end solution. Strong management support and sponsor support. That is huge. If you do not have strong management and sponsor support, again, your system's going to die in the vine. As a business analyst, you're thinking, well, that's the project manager's job. They got to do all that. They got to talk to the sponsor. They've got to pull all that together. Business analysts in this room, how many people here are business analysts, by the way? I didn't even ask. Cool. Every one of you, you're responsible for everything. You're the person that gets the job done. So yes, the project manager's there to be your linebacker and clear the way for you, but you're the one with football. You're the one that has to get it done. And so sometimes your sponsor won't be involved or won't be involved enough. So you need to find other management that can carry that torch for you. You've got to be the cheerleader. You can't always count on your project manager to do everything for you. So it's a team effort, and keeping that management support and engagement is everybody's job. Another reason is that key steps in the SDLC were overlooked or rushed. And these are the two places where are my personal, I'll get up on my soapbox, I'm just going to say it. Design and implementation. Business analysts have got to be involved in design. Design is not just architecture. Design is user interface. The way something works will affect whether people like it or use it. You need to be in there, you need to be working with your stakeholders and working through that design process. People rush through it all the time. They get their business requirements, they hand it off to the developer, and then they wonder why they didn't get what they wanted. Because the business analyst wasn't helping in the design. Implementation planning, also, there's so much involved in that, and people don't even like to think about it until they're through testing. This needs to start, implementation starts at the beginning. As soon as you know where you're going, you need to start doing change management. You need to start planning your training. My other soapbox issue. People never put time and effort into training. It's your best change management option. Okay. I'm being crushed. So those are my two issues. Design, planning, people overlook it all the time. As a business analyst, as my fellow business analysts in this room, you need to get yourself in there because you can save a project if you can make sure those two things are done right. Even bad systems that maybe don't even have all the data, if they're designed well and implemented well, people love them. The other thing people need to consider is an organization's authority to do something. So it's sort of that capability, it goes back to that saying, can the organization handle it? But it's not that internal organization's ability to handle it, it's their ability to influence other organizations to adopt something. A perfect situation would be a state organization who's trying to get a county or a local program to adopt something, and you don't have a legal mandate or money to hold over their head to get them to play. It takes a whole different approach, and so you need to understand what's the motivation of my end users to use this system, and how involved do they need to be in the process to get them on board. And in that situation where you are dealing with something that's sort of a voluntary thing, you need them involved at the beginning, you need cheerleaders, it's a much slower and harder process. An organization was not ready for the change. Again, it comes back to the implementation planning, since I've probably already over time, I won't talk about it, but it's basically you need to make sure that you have good change management. You understand the processes as they are and how they're going to change, and you help everybody get there. And manage fear. Everybody's afraid of change, including me. And another big issue is an organization that has difficulty making decisions. There are some organizations that they have a really good structure, or they're very quick to make a decision. Other organizations have a really hard time, they change their minds a lot. So you have to decide how formal of a decision-making process you need to have, and always, always, always have an escalation path, and document, document, document. So those are the other reasons why projects fail. I shouldn't say fail, suffer, because you can survive anything if you work hard enough at it, long enough at it. On your desks is just a quick handout to sort of remind you what we talked about and some ideas for how to avoid some of the problems that we talked about. System development lifecycle, just really quick in case you're not as familiar with it as you'd like to be. It's just initiation, planning, requirements, design, development, testing, implementation, and lessons learned. And again, we'll talk a little bit more as we move forward through the presentation about kind of the business analyst role here. So the qualities of a successful business analyst. Becky? I think I'm giving the direct slides, or
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Great, thanks. Carrie asked you a minute ago how many are practicing business analysts. Saw most of the hands go up in the room. How many have been on large or major projects in the past as a business analyst? Okay, so you know a lot. How many are going to be on a major project in the coming year and a half or so? Okay, so some more projects coming on. When the board was thinking about what sessions we wanted to include in the project management forum, we could not neglect the importance of the business analyst. And Carrie and Nellie have talked a little bit about that already, but I'm going to speak from the heart now, because I became an accidental business analyst when I joined the state back in 1982. I was hired to do program reviews at colleges, and I was really a program expert. I learned the student loan program. I learned how to do reviews of how schools did their performance in the student loan program. And then one day, some consultants in our organization decided that we should have a brand new student loan delivery system. So lo and behold, I became a business analyst. Well, I really wasn't a business analyst. I was a SME. And I think a lot of people start their career as a business analyst by really being SMEs. The neat thing is, today there's a lot more information and tools and skills that are clearer now, so that people can become professional business analysts, because that's really what the state needs today to deliver successful projects. But it was a long slog, and I had to kind of learn as I went in order to contribute in a successful way, or a meaningful way, to our major project. By the way, we eventually did build that system, and it was a success, but it was very painful. We made a whole lot of mistakes in those, it was really the 90s when we built that system, and we were one of the newspaper headline projects at the time, but we actually did implement it, and it actually did perform for many, many years quite successfully. So, but I'm grateful that things are more structured today, more tools and more skills. And what my colleagues and I are going to talk about a little bit is the qualities of a business analyst. We're going to talk about what the role the business analyst plays. That's what Karen's going to talk about. Anne's going to talk about what skills and tools that business analysts can have available to them. This is just scratching the surface, mind you. You guys already know a lot of this stuff, but it's kind of a reminder and things that you can leverage as you teach the new ones coming up to be business analysts. But I want to talk about the qualities because it's who you are, not necessarily what you know, that can make a difference. And that's not that I'm super proud of everything that I am, but I did find that just by force of interest and maintaining certain qualities and going through, I was able to survive. And then I found that I was able to add value Not because I knew stuff, but because I was willing to be something to the team. Because every project, like every organization, has a culture. And the project might have a culture of drive and metrics and performance and everybody's got to roll, boom, boom, boom. But there's always going to be challenges, and if there's a sense of camaraderie and teamwork and shared purpose and vision of what it looks like when it's perfect on the other side, that can help you get through the rough times. So I decided to put down a few of the bullets that I think are important for the qualities of a successful business analyst. And first and foremost, the business analyst is the person who understands what's needed when the project is done. What's needed for the program and the business goals, and what's needed by the customers or the stakeholders. Now, of course, you have a project sponsor and project managers, and they all have this role, but in the details and decisions that have to be made as you go through the tricky times and the choice times of a project, that business analyst makes the difference and says, well, we could go this way or we could go that way, but this way is what's needed, because they know what the customers need or what the program needs. A good business analyst, and this is where the SME problem becomes, has to be overcome. A good business analyst knows or is interested in the new solutions, and they're capable of understanding the new solution values, or the value of the new solutions. So a lot of times SMEs say, well, this is the way we've always done it, we do it this way. Regulations say this, this, and this, we got to do it that way. Well, regulations usually say what, but they don't say how. And a project and technology is going to provide different how ways to do what needs to be done. So a business analyst has to be interested in that. How can we do it differently that'll be more efficient, more accurate, more customer-centric? A business analyst can make all the difference in the world on a project if they are passionate about good teamwork. They care about everybody's success, because they know that if everybody's successful and the project's successful, then something wonderful happens and something wonderful has been done. So it's not the individual attachment to the specific requirements or attachment to the ideas of an individual. It's more about how can we as a team succeed, because projects truly require a large number of people to come together and bring their expertise and bring their responsibilities to get it done. Here's an interesting one that I found is kind of helpful, and I've had my own struggles with it from time to time, and that is being self-confident but not being self-conscious. Being self-confident includes that you're capable of letting other people bring new ideas, and they're okay to hear them, or they're okay to change your mind or to change your position on things. Being self-confident means you know that you know when it's right, or you know that you know when it'll be healthy or work for people. So you don't have to be strong-willed, you don't have to be fighting with people all the time, but you can say, oh, that's a good idea. That's a certain amount of self-confidence. And self-consciousness on the other side is that a lot of times you're in a meeting and you think, well, I can't speak up because that person, they know everything. Or you get a little too concerned about how you will appear to other people in the course of dealing with issues. And so you're self-conscious, and then you hold back and you don't contribute in the way that you should. So if you can realize that the role you're playing is very important, the insights that you have are really critical, and contribute in a way that allows those best ideas to come out. A successful business analyst also understands the importance of expressing gratitude and celebrating success. Because all of the people in the IT organization or the project management organization, they're building something for a business purpose. And the business analyst is the closest person to the end result that they have at any point in time in the life cycle. And if the business analyst can say, that's a great idea, or that's a wonderful solution, or look how fabulous that's working, wow, and can bring that enthusiasm and bring that teamwork, it's very encouraging to the rest of the team. And then when problems have to be solved, and the rest of the team sees that the business analyst is a cheerleader for what's good, then they want to contribute and meet those needs. So that who you are can make a difference when you're a person who, instead of criticizing, or the first time you see something up on the board, you say, well, this is what's wrong with this, and this is what's wrong with that. Because that kind of tends to be a fallback position that people have. If instead you look at what's on the board and say, well, this would provide an interesting solution, or that might be good, you can still work in the conversation, the corrective things that you need to say, but you come out of the gate with the sense of, these people are trying to do their best, and they're working hard for this project, and I think we're going to be successful. In fact, I'm seeing us be successful. That can make a big difference culturally. I like to say about the third bullet here is that you stand on the balls of your feet. You got to be adaptive to change, because you think that it's going to go in a certain way. Maybe you've anticipated a certain approach to a technical solution, and it ends up it's not going to work like that, and something has to change. So if the business analyst can say, oh, well, that's a different way to do it, but customers will be okay with that, we'll just have to educate them, or the process that the business is going to have to employ will be slightly different, but it'll work, then be adaptive to change. Help keep the project going. Don't stall it by saying, well, I don't know what we planned it to be. You save those observations for when you're not going to achieve the goal of the project. So you have to be able to discern the difference. Is it the how or is it the what that's at stake? And then great communication skills. If you don't feel like you have great communication skills, practice them. Follow, mentor, get somebody who's really good at communicating and kind of mentor them, observe how they do it, because business analysts have to be the ones to convey to the team the information that the team needs. And don't ramble a lot, don't go on like I'm doing right now. Just pick the points that you have to make. I had a good friend one time in college, and everybody thought he was the wisest guy in the world. And it was because he never said anything. But once in a while he would say something and he would be right on point. He didn't need to, be arguing with anybody or giving his own opinion if other opinions were equally, useful. But when it came time to say something, you'd say it. So great communication skills mean you're listening very carefully, you're following the course of the conversation, and then at the right moment, you say what needs to be said, but you give other people room to respond and react, and you're clear. So I think that was the end of my slides. Those are my thoughts on who you are as a business analyst. So Karen.
Do you guys have anything you want to add to the qualities before we
Yeah.
move on?
Can I?
Sure. Yeah.
Because what I'm hearing from you is, in my mind, also a successful project manager.
Yeah.
They have to be able to do all these things.
Yeah.
So so the role is the same.
Yeah, the distinction I'd make between the business analyst and the project manager is that the business analyst is really focusing on the part of the project that's going to meet the business results, the need of the business. The project manager is focused on making sure the project moves along and stays healthy. They've got to factor in the scope and the deliverables ultimately, but also the time and the money and other aspects. But you're right, a lot of it does overlap, and ideally you have very strong compatibility between the business analyst and the project manager. Absolutely, and at BCSS, when we're working on smaller kinds of M&O projects, we always have a business analyst and a technical analyst that work together on the project management of the smaller project, because they need to be in sync. Where the technical analyst is going to say, will this solution be workable? The business analyst is answering the question, will it work for the business? Yeah, good point. Any other observations or questions at this point? Okay, good. Karen.
Great. Okay, well, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the value of the business analyst during different phases of the project. So we touched on that a little bit in the introduction, and there's also a more lengthy appendix that's included in your slide deck. But let's start with initiation and planning. So when you're just starting the project. You know, it's kind of a blank sheet of paper. So during this phase, the business analyst is going to play a role that's mostly like a strategist, an architect, and they've got a very holistic view of what they're doing. So, you know, in this phase of the project, what we want the business analyst to do is look at, you know, how do things fit together? Are there holes in the solution? And again, you know, kind of going off of what Becky said, you know, what kind of organizational change management is going to be required? This is the time to start thinking of all of those things: training, org change management, requirements, the big picture solution. The analysts should be participating in the strategy. You know, ideally, they need to be very familiar with the organization's strategic and tactical plans. They need to understand the culture of the organization, and they need to incorporate that into building the business case and the FSR. Also, this is where the business analyst can really help by participating in the initial risk assessment. So we need to know, how risky is this project going to be when we start out? So, and then obviously it goes without saying that the business analyst is going to be a key participant in documenting current and desired states for the business process. And also, and during this phase, the business analyst is going to be recommending business process improvements to the organization. Then, of course, we get into design development. So now that your project's approved, maybe you've gone through a procurement, and now you're starting the actual design, development, and implementation. And now the business analyst role changes, because now we don't have a clean sheet of paper. We have a defined project scope, and now we're bounded by that project scope in almost all instances. So now the role of the business analyst is very different, because now they've got to work very close with the business to define priorities. They've got to continue to identify gaps and risks and opportunities, because the goal now is to get to the end of the project and deliver business needs. So that doesn't mean there will never be changes. We all know that, and I'm sure there was a session somewhere along the day about that. But one of the big things is that they've got to be aware of the project scope, and they've got to continuously work with the business to understand their priorities. When we find gaps, and they're gaps that can't be addressed in the current project scope, they are key working with the business to determine, how can we work around this? How can we still be successful? How can we still meet the business needs, but without changing the scope of the project? And then the discussion about the project manager and the business analyst, very timely, because I will tell you, as a project manager myself, I also started out as a business analyst and systems analyst, and you know, I've worked on projects now for a while that have hundreds of people on them, and there's no way I can know every person on the project, unfortunately, as much as I'd like to. But I know every business analyst on the project, because I do view the business analyst very much as an extension of myself in delivering a successful project. So I talk to, work with, meet with the business analysts every single day to talk about what issues are they uncovering, what risks are they seeing, what gaps are they finding, so that we can get ahead of it and make sure that our sponsors and our program folks are satisfied with what is delivered in the end. They're also, I didn't mention it here, but Becky's comments kind of brought it to mind. They're also key in helping set those expectations. So it's not just that they're an extension of me, and as I'm going and talking to project sponsors and external stakeholders, I'm looking at them as helping me communicate into the folks that are going to actually be boots on the ground using the solutions that we are developing. The other thing that can never start too early is prioritizing things that are going to have to happen after the end of the project. So most of us, I think, well, let me ask, do most of you work in the IT arena or program? IT? Okay, so actually maybe about 75%. So, especially with IT projects, there's always an M&O phase. So one of the things that the business analyst helps me do from a project management perspective is when we identify those gaps and we have those workarounds, I rely on those business analysts to help identify the criticality of what needs to go in when we get into maintenance and operations. Oops, let me go back for just a second. And then the last thing I want to bring up here is that the business analyst is key in ensuring traceability. So when we say the project's done, how do we know that? We know that because we're going to do requirements traceability. And the business analyst is the person that I rely on to help ensure that the requirements that were set forth in the scope of the project that was set forth has been met, and we do that through our requirements traceability. So, during this phase of it, the person truly is working as a process analyst, a systems analyst, but they're bounded by that project scope. And then we get into maintenance and operations. And I know I'm kind of cutting it short, there's a lot more detailed phases of the system development life cycle and the project and the product life cycle. But here, once we get into maintenance and operations, so now we've successfully launched, in this case, an IT solution, or maybe if you're working on the program side, maybe you've successfully implemented some legislation or new regulation package. So now we're in maintenance and operations. And now we kind of go back and blend the roles. Now the business analyst takes on that role of that strategist and architect again, because now they're looking long-term. How do we ensure the longevity of what we've put in place? But they're also working as a process and systems analyst because we're, continuously changing. There's never a situation, especially on the IT side, where we're going to implement a system and then it's going to be there. And that, that holds true regardless of whether it's a custom developed solution or a COTS solution. And the same thing if you are on the program side and you're doing, legislation implementation or regulation implementation, there's always cleanup that has to be done. So now it's all about continuous process improvement, and then ultimately getting down the road, as many of us are, looking at system decommission and replacement. How many of you in your departments or organizations have a decommissioning project on the horizon or replacement? Oh wow, I'm surprised so few. Maybe you're just not admitting it.
We're not ready to let go.
Yeah. So when you do get to that phase of the product life cycle, where you have to consider, where you're no longer in a position that you can continue to improve upon what you have, and you really have to look at decommissioning and or replacement, your business analyst again is going to be key, and it's really going to be going back to now that clean sheet of paper. So now we've come full circle, and now we're looking at what are the possible opportunities, what are the possible strategies that we can use to come up with a new solution to replace our aging COBOL or natural or fill in the blank kind of system. So it's an important role, and I think it's something that for those of you who are already playing this role, it's an exciting role because you get to do something different every day. And as you can see, we've just touched on the surface, but the role of the business analyst is not something that you just do one thing and that's what you do every single day. You play different roles depending on the project you're on, the maintenance and operation effort you're on, the legislation that you're working on. Whatever it is, you're playing different roles at different phases of that life cycle, whether it's a system development life cycle or a product life cycle or a life cycle of a project, of a program project. So I'll stop there, see if Becky or Ann want to add anything or if there's any questions. Okay, well then I'll turn it over to Ann.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm still trying to decide if I'm going to hold this thing. I'm going to try and use the holder up here. No, I'm going to let you hold it. I want my hands free. I'm funny that way. All right. So I think when we were starting to brainstorm the content for this session today, I think I told the team that I thought that the business analyst is a lot like a universal translator. Any Trekkies here? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah? You know, as I thought about it a little bit more, I really kind of think it's more like a universal translator on steroids, right? Because it's not just taking what one person says and translating the business to the technical, it's also adding some intelligence behind that, right? The ability to find a common good, to understand where each party's coming from. And I've spent several years in my career as an analyst in a variety of functions. Universally, I've found that the ability to listen, and I really mean to listen, to make people understand that they're being heard is key. In the context of a project, being able to get to what the customer needs, and Becky touched on this in terms of qualities, that is really quintessential. And not what they say they want. We talk about this a lot in our shop today, getting our customers to stop talking about the technology. Technology's cool, we want this, we want that. Really trying to get our folks to instead ask their customers, what does your business do? What are you doing for your customers? What sorts of problems are you having? What sorts of things are you trying to solve? If we get this wrong as technologists, the whole solution, it's wrong. It's not going to meet the customer's needs. Really, when we look at skills for a business analyst, to be able to properly frame and structure the problem, that's about 75% of the effort that's required to come to an appropriate solution. Here, the ability to research, your analytical skills, your big picture thinking. These are going to be key to being able to properly frame the question. What is the issue that we're looking at? To really identify the cause and address it appropriately. And we often think of analysts as being very logical folks, right? Analytical minded, and that's as analysts, that's where we draw our strength, really. But as you can see from what we've listed here as skills, this is one facet. I think at least I know as an analyst, I've always identified very keenly with that analytical side. And as I progressed in my career, I see that there's so much more, right? A great analyst has very well-honed soft skills. They are very people-focused. They're very customer-focused, which is sort of counterintuitive to what we think of when we think of the word analyst. But these are qualities that make really good analysts. They are skilled at being a diplomat, being translators and negotiators, very strong negotiation skills. They are skilled at developing relationships. Oftentimes that's really how we get to what needs to be done, is developing those relationships, particularly where we don't have direct managerial control. We're peddling on influence, right? We're trading on influence and how we relate to people, right? So good analysts are very good at establishing rapport and developing relationships. And they're very strong communicators. Of course, we expect good business analysts to understand the technology, have the technological acumen, right? The good ones They understand the technology's potential, but they also understand its limitations, what can't be done, and appropriately set expectations. Great analysts, though, have business acumen in addition to the technical acumen. They understand the business, and where they don't understand the business, they go out and learn and ask questions. They're very quick learners. And this is something that Becky had alluded to in talking about where she started, right? It was, well, we have this need, go in and learn, right? And I think really great analysts are just curious sorts. They want to understand how things work, not just from the technology side, but from what the business is trying to accomplish. You know, a good business analyst learns business concepts, and they can quickly relate them to the specific needs of the project. So, you know, hungry for knowledge and understanding, great business analysts are also persistent. They're dogged. They don't give up. They don't accept status quo. They ask lots of questions until they get to where it is that they need to be, and really strive to understand all perspectives to be able to develop and propose a robust solution. So now that we've talked a little bit about the skill set, let's talk about some of the tools that are available to us as analysts. And this is not meant to be exhaustive, nor will I be going into any kind of depth, but just to kind of give you a flavor for what's available and hopefully whet your appetite to learn more. Let's go ahead, next one, please. All right. First one I'd like to touch on is SWOT analysis. And most of you familiar with SWOT analysis, have used it, right? Where we're looking at strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Strengths and weaknesses being what's internal to the organization, opportunities and threats being what's external to the organization. Now the end result of this analysis is interesting, and you know, a lot of your stakeholders love to see this, but I think what is especially nice about this is the journey that you take as you're doing the analysis, because you learn an awful lot that is really foundational to what you're trying to drive. Another tool when we're looking at analytical process is a framework called the IDEAL framework. I'm skipping ahead in my notes because I'm backwards on this stuff. Move some things around. All right, if you think back, at some point you've been exposed to the rules of journalism, right? Probably somewhere in high school where you had to write a paper, some such stuff, right? Rules from journalism. Who, what, where, when, and why. When we can answer these questions about a problem that's sitting in front of us, we know a great deal more of the story that we can address. IDEAL is a framework to help us get to this and actually evaluate some of the solutions that come out of it. So from IDEAL, it's an acronym, I being identify the problem. So recognize that there's an issue out there that needs to be addressed. The D would be define. Define that problem a little bit further. What is it? What is causing it? Can we get to the root of it? Once we're able to get to the root cause, we can examine options that address those root causes and identify some appropriate solutions. A is for act, essentially to develop that plan. And L, look at the consequences. In other words, do your risk assessment for the various options. A couple of other tools here, pros and cons and brainstorming, and I'm assuming most of you are familiar with these as well, right? Pros and cons used to look at the advantages and disadvantages of a given solution or proposal. This is really fabulous when you can line them all up and compare side to side so that you can make trade-offs based on risk assessment. Brainstorming, also a very useful tool just in generating ideas or solutions, and it can be done individually, it can be done in a group setting. The fundamental piece here is that you want to toss out ideas without judging them so you can generate as many ideas as possible. So later we go on to evaluate them. Affinity diagram is actually a really fabulous way of taking what you get out of a brainstorming exercise, and it's great for organizing the many pieces that you get back out of it so that you can discern common themes, right? And for looking for relationships. Cause and effect. This is another tool that's really good at getting at the essence of what is causing the issue to begin with, or the problem. Fishbone diagram is what you see here, and fundamentally it helps isolate what is generating the problem, so it gives you options on how to address it. You could attack a problem from many different angles, and depending upon where you would expect to get the most return, or the effort, is where you would want to address the issue to correct the problem. Flow charts, swim lanes, these are ways to look at process, right? Pretty much flow chart is an easy to understand diagram that shows steps in a process and how they fit together. Your swim lane is like your next step, which brings in your stakeholders so you can see who's doing what over the course of a process. And finally, tools that we might look to would be alternative thinking tools, lateral thinking. This is really trying to look at a problem at different angles. I mean, analytical people tend to look at problem solving as a linear thing to go out and do, and quite frankly, that doesn't always give you the solution. Lateral thinking sort of turns that on its head, and there are actually a number of different models and approaches out there. So some of them are things like provocation, in the things like just wishful thinking and exaggeration. These are things that aren't necessarily logical, but they can help generate different ideas to a solution that you wouldn't necessarily see if you were just approaching it from a logical standpoint. Contrary thinking is just one form of lateral thinking, and really it is looking at a problem which is in directions that are directly opposed to what people think of in general as a solution. Fundamentally, quote here from Humphrey Neal, who did quite a bit of work here in contrary thinking. When everybody thinks alike, everybody's likely to be wrong, or everyone's likely to be wrong. So there's opportunities to look at different ideas that not everybody is following, to come up with different ideas. All right, so I think at this point we need to hand back to the moderators to talk about solutions unless we've got some questions. All right, thank you.
Okay, we're done talking. It's your turn. So what we're going to do is do some activities. So what we'd like to do is sort of split the room. All of the tables on this side of the room are going to take on your scenario 1, and you guys have scenario 2. On your tables, there's a sheet of paper with scenarios. I know most of you were looking at them as you came in. So everybody on this side, you got scenario 1, and you got scenario 2. What I'd like you to do is, as a table, read the scenario, and then there are some questions afterward that are in the discussion section, and come up with some answers to those questions. And I'm going to give you each 10 minutes, or all 10 minutes, to think about it, discuss it, come up with an answer, decide who's going to speak for your table, and we'll have one person from each table talk about kind of what you think are the best answers to those questions, and then we'll let the panel respond as well. Okay, go.
Okay, everybody, we're gonna get started. So what we'd like to do is hear from you guys. So the people that are closest to me are gonna start first. Lucky you guys. So who is speaking on this side for your table? Hi. So go for it. What's your? Oh, I guess one second. I should describe the problem for those. For the folks on the other side of the. Yeah. Good. Well, I'm so sorry. I'm stealing notes here. So I thought I should read, in case the other side did not read option 1, other side of the room. An organization is implementing a document imaging and workflow system across their organization, which affects 5 programs and 3 primary processes. 3 processes identified in the project scope are more complicated and impact more programs than originally anticipated. Because of the potentially expanded scope, the project is now in threat of exceeding the available resources and budget. So this side of the room is in charge of determining what does management need to support decision related to the scope, and what key activities should be done.
Okay, our group thought that it would be a good idea, first of all, to understand what the impacts actually are, who's affected, and prioritize those impacts from low, medium to high. Some impacts are going to be livable, some impacts are not. So we would look at various models to present to management. We would show them model A is, these are the impacts, these are the livable items, these are the not livable items. If you choose this model, this is your trade-off. These are the costs, these are the additional resources, this is the extension on the timeline. And we'd do that for each different model that we would identify based on the impacts, so that they could look at that and make a well-rounded decision what they're in for, if they choose to either expand the scope or contain that scope to what their original idea was. On the second item, the types of things that we would do to prepare this material and deliver it, we'd be interviewing the different groups. First of all, how did we miss those impacts to begin with, these programs that were going to be impacted? How did we miss that? So we would go back and talk to the people who originally scoped the project. What was their understanding at the time? What did they fail to ask? Then we would go ask the projects that are impacted, what is it that this is going to mean to you? Let them actually lay out their expectation of the impact. What do they think they can live with, and what can they not? How does it impact their core competency of their business? Then we would present that in various models to management for them to select from. And we would show them, mock schedules and resources, maybe even an economic analysis worksheet. What's our long-term M&O impacts on this? So we'd have stakeholder interviews, of course, maybe do some fishbone diagram to show them where our potential problems lie and how we might come up with some mitigation strategies around that. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we thought about.
Awesome. Cool. All right. I'm going to call you table 2. I didn't know for you guys. Who is speaking on your side? All right. The brave.
Yeah, so I don't know if we can live up to that standard. Well done, table 1. But we did have some ideas that awful lot of overlap with the recommendations from table 1. But we observed that the analyst is responsible for going out and determining what the gaps are in the functional areas. They're going to need to reach out to all the people that contribute to the project and participate in the project. They're going to need to find out what additional resources are needed. They're going to need to be able to articulate that back to management. In cases where a lot of additional resources are needed by a team or set of teams, we have to talk about what kind of projects we can't do now because of this increase in scope in this project. Anytime you choose to do something, you choose not to do something else, and the analyst is responsible to deliver that back to their manager. Let's see, we talked about the idea that we might be able to give up other deliverables in exchange for the scope. We looked at possibilities of in getting increased funding or augmented staff. We looked at possibilities of redistributing responsibilities. So for example, in document management models, oftentimes indexing and validation, quality control is often delegated to the IT group. Maybe that can be distributed out to other parts of the organization to do on their own, thus reducing the overall impact to the IT organization. And I think that was about it. All right? Thank you.
Good job, you guys. Table 3 is just going to be like, ditto. Sorry. All right, who's up? Yes.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Anderson, and yes, this is ditto. Well, we had basically the same thing. It was important to bring everybody together because it affected many program areas, and then understand what the impact is of the different areas. But on number 2 is to draw up some workflows and do some brainstorming sessions, and pros and cons on what they really, really want and think that they really need and why.
That's what I would do. Cool. Does our team want to add anything to option 2, or option 1, I'm sorry, or scenario 1? No? I think they pretty much nailed it. I mean, these guys are on it. All right. Scenario 2. I'm going to steal someone's paper because I didn't grab one. Do you mind if I sneak in here and steal your paper? Okay. So for the other side of the room, scenario 2, stale requirements. An organization developed business requirements for a project. The project, this has never happened ever. Nobody has been in this scenario. The project took 3 years to move through the procurement process. The project finally has been initiated. The subject matter experts that developed the requirements are no longer around. The new vendor is on board and doesn't understand some of the requirements, and the new subject matter experts say they don't meet their needs. They're not correct. What do you do? Who here's taking it? All right, brave man.
She has important paper. Okay. So basically, what we started with is to identify the current business needs for the project itself, and to then revisit or actually review possibly with our stakeholders internally and externally, and make sure that we're still on focus for our project. Maybe if it has to, we'll have to rewrite some of the requirements or revisit them and make adjustments as needed. Add clarity, as we're saying, to some of the issues, because some of the people who were here before are now gone, and maybe processes change, technology keeps moving forward, like we heard downstairs below, all day today, that it's moving fast. So take some time, reevaluate those items. Again, check with our stakeholders, make sure that they're still in line with what we want to do, make sure they understand the process we're going to go through. Internally, we talked as a business person is to update our own knowledges, because 3 years has gone by. We've been kind of on hold, kind of stagnant a little bit, still processing. Hopefully, we've been keeping up on our processes, so we understand what the business needs of our stakeholders and our internal processes are in our own technology, what's going on. Look to others, because hopefully we can maybe reach out to those people who have left the project, because things were kind of stagnant, get their information, see what did you really mean by that requirement? We don't understand what you mean by that requirement anymore. So, or we want to change that requirement. Are you okay? Is that what you really meant? So questions like that go out to external people, and then understand what those maybe the gaps are. Learning what did we miss? What's new? What's changed? What's going forward? So we can fill those gaps and reduce some of our risk in all those processes. And then again at the end, gain collaboration with the people who are maybe coming in. We lost people going out. You're still there. People are coming in. Let's put people together. Let's talk about, okay, what do you know? What I know? Let's fill those gaps. Let's work together to get a good solution.
All right. Next table. Who's up? You're staring at me. Must be you.
That's me. It is. That's correct. So we had mainly kind of very similar kind of recommendations or thoughts. The first thing, though, we did say that we should go to the sponsor and tell them there may be some problems with the project. Yeah, although I don't know why we got selected, but we got the short straw. So, and then yes, what we suggested is we would go through the requirements, the current requirements, to see how they fit. Also, look at the current situation and kind of do a gap analysis there. Hopefully from there we'll be able to look at the different alternatives, pros and cons, also the risks. And out of that kind of, having done that, we would then be able to kind of make a recommendation. We would then meet with the program steering committee and look for a no-go, go kind of decision, whether to go forward with the project based on either our recommendation or, maybe one of the alternatives or a modification to that. Yep.
Wonderful. All right, last table. Who's up? Who wants it? Who wants it? All right, Nellie, you're up.
Oh, I'm up. Okay.
Nobody else will take it.
Ditto. No. We were actually saying that there's not a project that we've come across that doesn't have stale requirements, because, hey, Regina, we went to high school together. I just noticed you. The procurement process is so long, and business changes, and technologies change, and there's legislative mandates. There's all kinds of things that can happen between an FSR and the actual kickoff of a project. So We felt that just going back and revalidating all of the documentation on the project, starting with the charter, the business objectives, if stakeholders have changed, what's changed, kind of, and revalidate that. And then, like all the other tables said, look at each of those requirements, talk to the people that are there. Sometimes it's kind of a disadvantage or an advantage to have, if people have left, subject matter experts have left, because if they leave, it's like an encyclopedia leaving sometimes, because sometimes things aren't documented very well. But sometimes fresh ideas and new people with new experiences can come in and look at the business objectives and come up with some fresh ideas too that would be interesting to management and wouldn't impact too much the budget, maybe the scope, but then you would follow a change management process, of course, with what your findings were and what management actually ended up deciding based on your input and your alternatives that you presented.
Wrong. No, I'm just kidding.
You're getting more comfortable.
No, sorry. Our personality starts to come out. Sorry. A little Rain-Evic and a little. The point of that obscene statement was actually that there is no wrong answer. Every one of you came up with the right answer. The point of being a business analyst is you figure it out. You're going to come up with against a million different scenarios with a million different problems, and you just have to figure out how to get where you need to go and meet everybody's needs. It's easy, right? But you find a way through it. And being curious, being a good listener, all of those things really will help you get there. So we are at, what time are we? I lost track of where we are. We're early. Let's do another scenario. So we're going to do this again. You're not done. Okay. So scenario 3, this side of the room. Scenario 4 on this side of the room. And we probably won't be able to talk through everybody's table, so we'll see how many people we can answer the question. But go for it. All right, you guys, I'm going to cut you guys a little short this time. What's that? 2 things. There you go. All right, deal. See, analyst right there. Improving the process. All right, you guys, let's wrap it up. We're going to start talking about basically what we like is like 2 options from each table. So, are we going to have the same speakers? All right. Yep, favorite 2 things. And remember, there is no wrong answer. There's no one way to do anything. Do we want to read any of this? Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It's really long.
It is really long.
Read the first.
Yeah, what's the, let me.
First sentence.
Okay. Okay, so just for the other side of the room, this is a go, no go scenario. A project must develop and implement an integrated benefits processing system that could process applications, determine eligibility, track status, facilitate electronic data exchange with trading partners, and make payments for several different programs. And their job was to determine, I lost the questions there. There's a whole bunch of scenarios that went wrong with the system that are they're trying to decide kind of whether to pull the plug on it. And they wanted to know kind of what went wrong and what could have prevented it from happening. Trying to sum up there.
So when we were reading through the different scenarios, it looked like a lot of things went wrong. But we'll just focus in on some of the things. One of the things we noticed was that they didn't really engage all the user, the stakeholders. They used the subject matter experts as their business analysts, and it's good to involve your SMEs, but it's also important that you involve other people, other subject matter experts, because when you're focused in your own job, you tend to forget that when you hand things off to other people, that they also have other things they do with it that you may not know of. So one of the things that we also noticed is what could have prevented this from happening at the beginning. The solution should have been modeled after more programs other than just that one program, this means. And what should the department have done differently? As we said earlier, more people should have been involved. There should have been more experts in people that design the electronic processes, because apparently the department didn't have a lot of experience in designing it, and they went forward with the project.
Great. All right. Table number 2. Who's up? Who's speaking?
What?
So.
Okay, apparently I'm speaking. We figured that somebody should have just picked up a project management manual of, and that probably would have solved most of the problems from the get-go.
Number 1.
Yeah, number one. What went wrong? Nobody learned how to do any type of project management from anyone. So, and you can see it's so simple. It's just every single one of these is an issue, and you know, there's so many things wrong. You can go on forever. But what could have prevented this from happening? There could have been a lot more collaboration. There could have been a lot more of everything, right? So when you look at the department had little experience with designing electronic processes, maybe this department wasn't prepared for this level of project. Maybe they should have asked another control agency or something for maybe CTA could have been a good choice to handle this project for them. So there's a lot of little things you could have done differently. And then what should this department have, could have prevented this from happening. What should this department have done differently? Everything.
Okay. Anybody want to take this one? You're going to pass. Okay, fair enough. Okay. Scenario 4, and I'm going to read over your shoulder real quick. Thank you. Your organization has hired an integrator to develop a document imaging system and workflow system. The design of the proposed solution impacts existing processes that cross several programs. The organization will not be able to operate without changing business processes and staff roles. How do you ensure the culture accepts the change, and how does the business analysts ensure alignment between processes, roles, and system design? Who's up? Don't all jump up at once. Anybody want to take it?
All right.
All right. You don't need that. Okay.
Let's see. So, 2 sets of notes. So, engage the participating program areas, because apparently there's several of them here, in the discussion and the decision-making process. Otherwise, you're not going to get the buy-in. So,
right.
Make sure that everybody has a role, has a voice in what those procedures are going to look like, what the new roles might be, what, as far as interacting with this imaging and this document management system. So
right.
Big part of it is to make sure everybody has a voice and that everybody has some part of the decision-making process. And once you've got that buy-in and we're all working on a common goal for a common design, in order to, at least this is something I just wrote down here too. I would recommend that we came up with some sort of a visual representation of what those decisions were. Something that came to mind was a racing matrix, and that's a means that allows you to identify who's responsible. So you have all these roles that you've identified in each one of the different departments, and now with each one of those roles, you're going to have someone who's responsible, someone who's accountable, usually the project manager or the program area, the management of that, communication piece, and then an information. So that's the racing part of it. And by looking at that matrix, you can see all the different roles and who's responsible for what, and that helps with that second part as far as how do you ensure alignment between the different processes and the roles.
Perfect. All right. Next table, who's up? Again, wow, 2 in a row.
I know, aren't I lucky?
It was a mutual assignment.
Yeah. So what we have, the first thing is that we would do a stakeholder analysis to see what was to ensure that everybody, who needed to be involved and what new stakeholders there were, ensure that we had strong sponsorship from the sponsors, training. We would also do a cultural assessment, which may lead us to a impact analysis of the changes. We would try and make sure that we had a cross program kind of project team or at that level, and lots of involvement. Okay. And then in terms of the second portion, which is how to kind of link them together, what I thought we would use kind of use cases, maybe at the business level and also at the functional level. That obviously would percolate down to the kind of design and, again, involvement. Okay.
Perfect. All good stuff. All right. Last table. Who wants to speak to it? All right, Nellie.
Only because I have something to add. So
I know, it's hard because it's really good.
For me, organizational change management is like a parallel process for a project. It starts at the beginning. There's actually a psychology of change. It's like a bell curve where people are in denial and then they sabotage, they try to kind of negative, and then they accept, and then they master. And it's a two-way communication throughout. So if the process has to change, then you have to define the gap between the current and the future, and you have to train based on roles, each person's role and how their role will change, and it's a constant communication throughout the project. And I don't think a lot of projects do that, but it's almost like a separate parallel project that goes on.
All right. Good answers. Any questions or anything anybody wanted to ask about that? So everybody who was brave enough to contribute for the table, please stand up. Okay, you guys. I know we're still grabbing some things, but the last, or what we wanted to leave you with was, if you're looking for ways to improve your skills, there's a lot of things you can do. Learn by doing, which is accept new challenges. There's a lot of business analysts in this room, so that's awesome. You guys are obviously already doing that. But actively engage challenges. Go in and be the one to volunteer to take the painful process. You're going to learn a lot. Just remember, there's no wrong answer. It's just make a decision, move forward, use all of your analytical skills to make sure you're making the best decision you can make, and move on. You can get certified through the IIBA. That's the BABAC certification. There's lots and lots of publications out there that you can read on business analysis, on change management, on organizational structures, psychology behind thinking. I mean, there's a million books that would help you as a business analyst. And so whatever your areas of interest are, like I personally am always interested in like the brain and how that helps you make decisions or not make decisions or react. But there's a ton out there. Communicate. This is the idea I love. Start a brown bag lunch. One of the things that I think is helpful here and why we spent time having you guys talk to each other is you guys are a wealth of knowledge to each other. I love going to lunch with my coworkers and talking about my project and hearing what they're dealing with, how they're dealing with it. I've learned so much by just listening to other people. That's really, experience is the key. So get together and start talking. Grab some scenarios, make some up, and then have at it and listen to each other's ideas. If you can find a mentor, connect with a mentor who can help you through issues or concerns, or maybe help you learn kind of where else you can go in terms of getting your skills, either handling issues or whatever. And get trained. Just build a knowledge of various analysis tools and techniques. So the SWOT, the IDEAL, there's a lot of different tools and techniques out there. People are always coming up with new ones, new facilitation methods, all kinds of things. So just sort of keep up to date, and I'm pretty sure there's even a magazine, which is sort of embarrassing. And Nellie, I'm sorry, you.
In the keynote this morning, Carl Carlos mentioned that the state was going to try to start business analysis and requirements development training in the Rancho Cordova facility. I don't know if you all heard that, but I'm not really sure of the details, but that's something to watch for and maybe talk to your management about. Oh, okay, great.
So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Carrie Gutierrez. I'm actually, sorry, I just ran up the stairs. And I don't need that. I can talk loud.
You do need the mic. Oh, that's great, because the recording, I keep forgetting.
Okay.
Sorry.
Let me catch my breath. I literally ran up the stairs because I did want to come in. BA, honestly, is a passion of mine. So, and because of that, we are actually working. So I have asthma. And I literally ran up the thing. I just wanted to catch a tail end, so my apologies. I got to catch my breath. All right. So we have actually been working with UC Davis to put together an interagency agreement that will actually bring, they have a current BA certification program that is online. So we're going to work with them to actually translate that into a classroom instruction. It's very draft right now, but what we're looking at is the possibility of a 14-day curriculum over 4.5 months. What it will offer is, sorry, take a deep breath. So what it will offer is the ability to obtain your hours if you want to become certified, because it is offered through IIBA. So that was the cool thing, is that UC Davis has already taken care of that. As well as you will be able to apply for academic service units. So for those that are, continuing education, we thought that was an important component. There are modules within the program that if you're PMP, you'll be able to, get your PDUs, or if you're already BA certified, you would be able to get your certification units updated there. So that's one of the programs. We're going to do a pilot. The plan right now is to launch that in January of 2014. Sorry, I'm really not nervous. It's like my asthma is like killing me. Okay, so the other thing that we're doing is we also have currently curriculum out at the Training and Education Center. It's interesting because I discovered it. It's actually called SDLC Analyst Certification. But when we started really looking into that, it is offered by Fifth Solution. Spiros is actually an instructor out at Sac State. And so a component, I would say, out of probably the 5 or 6 modules, there are at least 3 that actually speak to business analysis, how to elicit requirements, how to translate them into, functional requirements. So that's another option. We also worked with him recently to pull one of the modules out and have that very specific to business analysis requirements. So we're coming up with many options. Carlos also talked about the Project Management Academy, or series, if you will. And one of the topics will actually focus on business analysis and requirements. So we're trying to put together a curriculum and a program that touches on BA, but that there's lots of opportunities, right? All the way from the 3 or 4 hour workstation. So lots more to come. If you're interested, there is a table downstairs and you can sign up. Sorry, I'm going to stop talking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the other thing we want to do is ask you guys, what would benefit you? What are you looking for in terms of training, and what could Carlos offer you? Are there areas of interest in particular that you would like that we can maybe communicate back? You want that? Anything else? Anything else? Then okay. Do you have anybody? Oh, sorry. Did you have a question? No. Okay. All right. I see one.
Diagramming methodologies, I think that helps a lot in doing requirements analysis. To start with context diagrams and move on down through the hierarchy each year. And we don't really do that in the state. I know I went back to school as an older adult, got my IT degree, and they focused on that, on the diagramming and that, but they only did it at a high level. When you go to work, they will have the diagramming methodology. They want to use those type of symbols and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that was helpful, and I see it more coming in. And we've had some classes with public health and getting us a lot of training and that sort of thing. So is there going to be that type of curriculum? Because I think it's very valuable, but we all have to speak the same language so we understand the diagram. And then we have somebody that leads when they get something to help the
So do you think, will there be any possibility of diagramming types of classes? Methodology related to diagramming requirements and processes? Do you know that? Okay. If not, we'll bring that forward. Okay. Anybody else?
Can I add on to that? Sure. Do you have any examples of a detailed design document that would be more in sort of a process flow? We're working on that right now, but we cannot find any examples of really good detailed design.
Oh, I have one.
Yeah,
we can find. I do have one. Yeah.
Things have been done well.
Right.
Some done poorly too. but
Right.
you can find things
We can probably find you some examples. I find like when I do, I don't know, I was to say, when I do a detailed design, generally, I do that in conjunction with who my developer is, so that as I'm for me, the detailed design is much of the external side of it, and so I like to make sure that what I'm documenting is going to translate for them and how they're going to do their development. You don't always have that benefit.
Yeah, we actually are doing that. We're working with our developers.
Okay, and I'm sorry, in the back. I didn't. So there's a local IAB chapter that meets quarterly. Yes, that's a great way to find a mentor.
How do you find that chapter?
Yeah, do you have any idea where that chapter
They
is?
have a website. You can probably go through that.
Okay. 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 Any other questions or ideas or
Did you talk about communities of interest as well?
communities of interest? No.
Oh, okay, so that's another, I'm trying to look at this from, all angles, so everything that we're looking to launch is communities of interest, communities of practice. Back in the day, we used to call them user work groups, so we're gonna use this as a kind of means to start launching that. So getting down at the table, if you're interested in participating, please sign up and try to understand, what is, who's interested in participating in those. We would actually be going to host them out at the training center in Metro Cordova, or it's something that could be located, amongst various departments as well. And it's one of those things I think we over the years have attempted to do those kinds of things, but it takes work. So we talked about that out of the training centers, that we would provide the logistics and the administrative work to carry this forward. We just need a group of people that have an interest in really sharing lessons learned and what went well and what didn't go well. In the UC Davis curriculum that developed, we've already started to give them case studies as they're developing their scope of work and give them examples of where we see that projects are done a good job with requirements and maybe ones that haven't done because we've heard about that, I think, in several of the keynote speakers this morning. If you're not making those mistakes, then you're probably not reaching the limit of potential of your learning. It's just a matter of how you learn that and how you apply it. So, as well as when curriculum, we're gonna reach out to the people that are doing this work and ask them to participate in the presentations and their case studies for it. Because it's important, obviously, all of this that it's relevant. And we want to hear about how, Bank of Minnesota, take the requirements on their projects. So those kind of things. So I think it'll be very exciting and very
Cool. All right. 1 minute.
I'd just like to share with everybody another discipline called Disciplined Agile Development by Scott Ambler. Don't know if you've heard of it, but it's...
You're close enough.
Okay. I know in the state we do a lot of waterfall development and IT projects, but Agile has a lot to offer. The challenges have been it's not scalable, and it's a little loosey-goosey on handling risks. There's some holes in it, but a gentleman named Scott Ambler developed a methodology for IBM about 10 years ago, and he and his partner, I can't remember his name, but got their book. They wrote a book on it. They have certifications on it. It's called Disciplined Agile Delivery, and they have modified it so that you can do Agile for large projects. and you do releases very quickly so your customers have something in hand to be trying out rather than having all the requirements up front, which we generally miss something anyway. And in software, my end of things at ARB, people don't always know what they want until they get their hands on it. So the requirements aren't always on target to begin with. And then if they can be massaged as you go along, oftentimes they get what they like sooner because you're doing releases more quickly. And they really have been very actively involved in the development process with the developers sitting at the same table, and the analyst is in there facilitating everything. So I just highly recommend that if you want to take a look, Disciplined Agile Delivery, that book. You can look into their certifications too, and I would promote that for state to look at that too.
Scott Ambler.
Scott Ambler. All right, anybody else? I think we're closing up shop here. All right. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you guys coming and participating. And there's more stuff over here.